one in the front. That is not an exit. Okay, that goes back into the school. 2 in the back. All right, you may go across the cafeteria and go to the left. When you go out the back doors, go left, that's out. When you come down here, go right, that's out. Thank you, thank you. So I'd like to officially open the planning board meeting of December 16th, 2025. And the first item and the only item on the agenda tonight is 75 Reed Road. This is going to be the only in-person meeting. The remainder of the meetings will be remotely. All right? And at the end, the next meeting will be January 21st, but we'll talk about that more later. All right? And we're going to put a limit on the meetings. If I got one complaint last time, they said they ran way too long, so the meeting is going to be promptly adjourned at 9:30. Okay? Now tonight, there's going to be, our planning director will fill you in on what's been going on for the last year and a half, and then they will turn that over to national development, and then when national development finishes, it will come back to the board to set a few ground rules for questions, statements, and whatnot, and then we'll go from there. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to our planning director, Christina Johnson, and allow her to, which most of you might know what's been going on, because I believe there's been 2 or 3 different meetings with different groups in town. So thank you. One thing I do ask, during the presentations, there'll be no questions. National Development and the planning director have worked very hard on this presentation and would like to listen to them completely. There will be plenty of time through the public hearing process to ask questions. Again, maybe not tonight, I don't know how long we're going to have for questions, but there will not, the public hearings will not end until all the questions are asked. Answer the different story, ask, is where we'll go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for taking time out of your schedule. I know with the holidays, this is a bit of a challenge, but thank you for coming here tonight to join the Planning Board and National Development. This evening, as you know, kind of marks the beginning of a public process to review a redevelopment proposal at 75 Reed Road, as we all affectionately call it, the Intel site. I don't think that's ever going to die. It's kind of like the Rotary. It's just, that's what it is. For those who I'm not acquainted, it's a pleasure to meet you. I am the Director of Planning and Community Development for the town, and joining me is Everett Fields. He is the newest member of our, now completing our 3-member department. So we're very excited to have him here, and what a time for him to join us. So very, very thrilled. So before I proceed with some very brief table setting remarks, because I know you're very interested in what is being presented tonight, I just want to express some gratitude to the many people who have been working alongside me behind the scenes. But first, I'd actually like to take the time to thank Officer Krogan and Hudson's 4-legged social media celebrity, Murph, for joining us tonight. Can we get a round of applause for Officer Krogan? Thank you. So speaking from experience, a quick visit and a little conversation with Murph, yes, I do talk to animals, can actually recalibrate your mood in an instant. And I thought that would just set a really nice tone for tonight as we start moving forward in this process. And I think Murph needs a new trading card. Murph does the planning board. Let's get on that. And also thank you to all of the members of the municipal permitting team. These are my colleagues in government, police department, fire department, health department, DPW, building department, conservation, who have worked with me every step of the way over the past 6 months, reviewing preliminary plans, providing critical guidance throughout the process. I can't do it without them. They help me be a better project manager for the town. So thank you for your expertise and collaboration. Thank you to the town manager, Tom Gregory, and the select board for their continued support of my office's work, including their support in moving this process forward. And finally, thank you to the planning board members who selflessly served the town I have served on my city where I live, planning board. It's not an easy feat to serve on a regulatory board. It requires an extraordinary amount of time, preparation, dedication, and a lot of outside of work hours for those that are still working full time, jealous of those that are in the retirement phase, and frequently under challenging circumstances. So please give a round of applause to the planning board and their service to the town. I never got a round of applause on the planning board I served on, so I thought it would be nice for you to do that for yours. So now let's move forward into what's being discussed tonight. So as you all are aware, Intel began decommissioning the site and their manufacturing operations prior to the COVID pandemic, and in 2022 moved forward with the sale of the property. Not going to dwell on that process. No one liked it. I didn't like it, and we're not throwing the book away. We're turning the page. We all learned a lot, and we're moving forward. So the property has a new owner, National Development. They are a local development company. You're going to hear all about them in just a minute. They purchased the site from Intel back in 2023. Intel was leasing back the property until very recently. Before the conveyance of the property to National, Intel secured their development entitlement. Many of you were probably involved in that particular process that took place in 2023. So they have their development entitlements under the existing zoning framework that's in full force and effect, which transfers to successor property owners. And in a moment, Katie Snyder from National Development is going to provide a more detailed overview, kind of the history of the site. I always like to hear the history. It's pretty fascinating. So in terms of what this process is all about in the jurisdiction, National filed for site plan review for a 950,000 square foot industrial campus with the planning board. That was done on November 19th. That application submittal was deemed complete by me, based on our site plan review regulations. It is important to note that no tenant or user has been identified at this time. I know that's kind of hard, and I've seen sort of the Facebook commentary. Don't call me first before you make some assumptions on social media. I'll be able to clear up any misunderstandings. National will discuss what this means in terms of the scope of the development program that they're proposing. But before the site plan was even filed, a lot of behind-the-scenes review work has transpired with municipal staff, the aforementioned departments, to ensure that the table is set for the planning board, but also for all of you as well. We have a team, meaning we, the town, have a team of peer reviewers paid for at the expense of National Development to evaluate noise, traffic, and the stormwater aspects of the site. And these folks have been working with municipal staff and the national team to establish the foundational methodologies necessary to evaluate the potential impacts related to noise, traffic, and stormwater, the elements that are within the jurisdiction of the planning board. And as you all know, this site is zoned industrial, and what is being proposed is allowed within the framework of the zoning bylaws. Many of you have heard my remarks about the mechanics of what this process is before, but there may be some new folks that are popping into this process, so I think it might be helpful to quickly explain. And I will not use planning and zoning jargon, I promise. So in Massachusetts, site plan review is a technical review process used by planning boards to evaluate the design and layout of development. That's allowed by right. It focuses on the technical and design elements such as access and circulation, parking, drainage, landscaping, lighting, noise, stormwater traffic, and overall site functionality. Through this process, the planning board can impose reasonable conditions of approval, and it's important to note they need to be rationally related to the development and also proportional to the scope of the development program. Site plan approval is not a permit in the way you think about a building permit or a special permit. It's a process. And it's not discretionary. So this process falls solely within the jurisdiction of the planning board. So no other board, committee, or commission in town has jurisdiction over site plan review. National development will be required to undergo state environmental review process, which brings together the Commonwealth's regulatory agencies that have jurisdiction over this matter, including the Department of Environmental Protection for Air Quality and the Massachusetts Department of Transportation for the evaluation of the Washington Street Route 85 connector intersection. That is under the jurisdiction of the Commonwealth, not under the jurisdiction of the town. And jurisdiction over those matters rests solely within those regulatory agencies. And finally, for many of you, you all know the fiscal the impact and what this can bring to the town in terms of tax revenue. So the estimated tax revenue to the town is approximately, annual tax revenue is approximately $3 million. We'll be hearing this evening from RKG Associates, from a colleague that I know very well. We have done work together in the past, who will provide an in-depth analysis of the fiscal impacts to the town. I do want to emphasize that this estimate was not developed arbitrarily or out of thin air or on the back of a napkin. It's grounded in the town's historical assessment data for the property and the growth value trend associated with this type of development. And he'll walk through that methodology. It's actually it's very interesting. While the figure, of course, is an estimate, 75 Reed Road has traditionally been the town's largest taxpayer. Redevelopment of the site will contribute to the town's long-term fiscal sustainability and will generate broader regional economic development. This site has actually been identified by the Commonwealth's Mass Econ, it's a quasi-state agency, as one of the Commonwealth's top redevelopment opportunities in the entire Commonwealth. So this has local and regional impacts in terms of economic development. I really appreciate you taking the time and the patience. I really love serving this town and working for all of you, and I really appreciate you coming here and participating in this process. And I'm going to now turn the floor over to Katie Schneider, Principal at National Development. Katie and I have been getting to know each other over the past, 2 years, 2+ years, putting this together for all of you. So with that, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I always feel funny with the microphone, so bear with me. But, thank you, and thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate sort of the general patience that everybody has had with us. We know that this has kind of been a long time coming. We understand we sort of just joined the party, so bear with us. And I'll also just add that, this is intended to be the first of a few meetings. This will be the first sort of general overview. Obviously, Christina gave us a wonderful sort of procedural overview and introduction, but we intend to take tonight to just really frame the project, show you the general sort of overview, knowing that we're going to spend a lot more time on things like traffic, air quality, sound, and what am I forgetting? Stormwater. Thank you. I knew you would remember that. So we have tonight to talk through. I have about 20 minutes to talk through this presentation. Of course, Eric's going to speak. So please continue to be patient with us, and we'll make sure we get through all of the questions and comments, as the chair had mentioned. So again, I'm Katie Schneider. I am a senior vice president here at National Development. I've actually been with the organization, just to frame it a little bit. I've been with National Development for 11 years. Been on the development team, building and developing properties for all of that time. And I've been working, as we've mentioned, the last 2.5 years looking at this particular site, which is a long time before you put a shovel on the ground. So I'm also joined tonight by a really broad, our depth of team here is here tonight. Not everybody is speaking, but they wanted to come. I know we're moving to Zoom after this, and I think just being able to show their faces and the fact that they've been here on a team is really important to us. So just so you know, so we have Bowler, who has done all of the civil and landscaping work. Had Austin Turner here, wave your hand. Has been in the trenches with me for the last 2.5 years. Also in the trenches, Randy Hart with the HUD, if you just kind of wave your hand. You'll see these faces on Zoom in about a month's time. Also here tonight, Mark Vaughn with Remo and Braun's team kind of keeps us in line and makes sure that we don't get over our skis on our legal components. You've heard from Eric and Halverson with RKG. They'll be presenting tonight. as well as Epsilon. We have two people here tonight. We have Sonia, our air quality expert. You'll hear from her closer to February. And Dave Hewitt, who is our key NEPA filing folks and print sound analysis. So you'll hear from him in the future as well. All the way from New Jersey, we have Claudia from Ware Malcolm, who's our architect for the building, and supporting him on the sort of MEP side, and then also we've done extensive work on energy modeling. All of this is happening before we even get through, to our first permitting meeting. Energy modeling, MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing design, and then geoengineers, who is not here tonight, but they are our environmental, in terms of soil and land, and geotechnical engineers. We have a really robust team. And before I go to the next slide, I know Christina did a lot of things. I truly want to say that I really appreciate, I know it was a contentious process the last time. I appreciate the town sort of hearing from us, working with us. Every single department in the town of Hudson has taken my phone call, has kind of helped me through. And a special thank you to Christina and Tom Gregory, who have kind of kept us in line and made sure that we followed all the proper protocols. So appreciate everybody's time tonight. So what is national development? Who are we? We are, like Christina mentioned, we are a local development shop. We are anything but national. I don't know who decided on that name. I was not around at that time. We are national development, but we are a locally based organization. We've been in business for 45 years. We've worked in a number of communities across Massachusetts. 90% of the work we do is in Massachusetts. We've done some work in neighboring states and starting to reach beyond a little bit further. But historically, all of our work is here, which just generally means that we are looking to have repeat business, right? So we're pretty good at that. We don't get 45 years without that. So we have a lot of repeat tenant, investors, things of that nature, but we also work in the same towns time and time again. In fact, I'm working on a project in Natick that I worked in Natick 10 years ago, and another project in Natick right now. So I'm often before communities more than one time, so we operate maybe a little differently than our predecessor in this process. And I guess I would also say that beyond the real estate, I think we really pride ourselves in our process. We work to engage with communities and understand the importance of real estate and what it means for communities around us. So we take a lot of pride in our process, and we hope we can prove that to you all as we continue forward to this process. So Christina touched a little bit on the history of the site. I think a lot of people in this room know the history, but I will just spend a minute or two on it and what I've learned over the last several years. So the site, 150 acres, really big, the biggest project I've ever worked on, I'll say that. Very big campus. It was a former apple orchard, and then originally developed in the 1970s, late 1970s by DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation. We put the first two buildings in, and then ultimately Intel Corp expanded the campus to about a 1.3 million square foot operation that included, their chip manufacturing for many years. And then over the last, decade or less, Intel has really been phasing out, and it's two slides in the future that show this aerial view of that change. But Intel has, really has phased out, obviously they're out there now, but they phased out over the last 8 or so years. They took down the chip manufacturing facility in 2018, and then, of course, when COVID arrived, things changed significantly for them as well. So the campus has really dwindled down over the last several years. And of course, they look to really take the liability of that asset off their books. They sold the property to us in 2023, and at which point we dove in and started to understand more and more about this project. Intel did lease it back, as Christina mentioned, for 18 months. We were surprised that they took all those 18 months, but they did. But it really offered us a unique opportunity to spend some time while Intel was staying within the campus, to make sure we could look at the marketing of the site and also just understand the property itself and the buildings that we had just purchased. So we've heard from a lot of prospective tenants over that time, prospective operators. We engaged actually an entirely different set of architects and brokers to look at the existing buildings. We studied, the frame of the buildings themselves. We looked at, the ability to sort of adaptively reuse the existing buildings. We spent about 4 or 5 months working through that, and ultimately, I found it kind of interesting because there's 700,000 square feet there today, or was. And what we learned is that as the code and how we design buildings has evolved over the last several years, it's the amount of money that we would have to spend to put into that facility to adapt it, to use it, was pretty big. And there was, at the same moment, there was not a lot of demand behind it. Demand for laboratory space, for research and development, office has obviously changed significantly over the last several years. So we very quickly determined that the facilities were ready for demolition and that they could not be re-tenanted or sort of adapted to the space. And so at the same time, as we were reviewing the existing properties, we were working very actively to market the site. So we heard from a lot of folks in the market, we heard from the tenants, and what we learned is that they really like this location, very proximate to the 495, 290 interchange. They like the scale of the site. The power capacity that exists on this site is really, there's no comparison in Massachusetts. It's supplied by Hudson Light and Power. There's about 40 to 50 megawatts of available power there, as well as a significant amount of water, which is why Intel really likes this facility as well. I also wanted to share this statistic. I don't intend to do a deep market dive. We have a lot of brokers that do that for us on a regular basis. I just wanted to share something that was brought up to me recently. So 80% of, if you think of all of the industrial, the warehouse manufacturing space that's available in Massachusetts, 80% of that inventory, if you will, was built prior to the year 2000. So one thing we've also heard from the market and to these prospective tenants, they are looking for more efficient buildings that operate better with different ceiling heights, different features that this existing stock doesn't have. So all of this has kind of pointed us towards the fact that there's a true demand for this particular use. It's in a great location, and it's supported by great infrastructure. So over the last few years, the tenants that have been looking at this have been warehousing and distribution. I think it's important to know that, and I should have mentioned this on the earlier slide, because we do at National Development all types of real estate, we do look at these properties for other uses. And I know that the question has come up a few times. Have you looked at residential? Have you looked at other uses? Because we do that and know how to do that, we absolutely have looked at that. We've leaned on our consultants. We've leaned on our broker teams to understand the market and demand. So we have really been pointed in the direction of warehouse distribution and manufacturing. So I think everyone knows as I mentioned, we elected to demo the building. We started that process actually in May of this year, for those that might not know. It was hoping to be done by the end of the year. We're looking at March of 2026. The reason for that is that those facilities, due to the age that they were built, a lot of materials were used that included asbestos and other things. We've all been identified in the process we have identified it in our review of the buildings, and we've been slowly working our way through the demolition process. Cranshaw Construction is our sort of sister construction company. They're running the process out there. I think folks may or may not know, but there's 2 buildings, HD1 and HD2. HD2, as of last week, is structurally down on the ground. There's still work to do to take the foundations out, and we're working through that. HD1 is taking a bit longer, and we intend to have that building down hopefully by early March. And there'll be some site work that resumes around that to make it safe and make sure that it's all buttoned up. So as I start to frame our proposal tonight, not to go backwards too far, but I thought this image was really helpful to see. It's an aerial image of the Intel campus at its full build, circa 2017. You can see, because we'll refer to it a few times tonight, there's the ring road, which is I'll start this pointer, I haven't done this in a while. The ring road comes around here. And I think going back earlier than this, and maybe the early 2000s, others in the room might know, I think they touched a little bit of land to the north of this. North is up the page, and south is down, east and west. But this really shows kind of in my mind, the Intel campus at its full build and full operation. From here to here. So, as I mentioned, in 2018, the fab building came down, some of the associated infrastructure that supported it. HD1 is the bigger of the two buildings, located here. So HD2 is over here. Now I'll keep up to our proposal. So here you can see we're proposing, as Christina mentioned, a 950,000 square foot facility. I'm going to walk you through this in a little bit of detail, but I just wanted to mention that part of our program is to really place this building within the formerly disturbed areas of the site. We've kind of pulled it, you could picture that ring road from the images before, we've pulled it to the center of that ring road, and then in our proposal, we're taking out about 2/3 of that ring road on the north side, and really pulling everything towards the middle of the site. And we zoom in on the ring road area itself. So 950,000 square feet. On the east side of the site, we have our car parking area. This is where the employees will come and park their vehicles when they come into the facility. We have 177 loading bays on both sides of the building. That is a cross-docked program. A lot of these types of facilities like to have the ability to go through the building with their goods and materials. And then also around the building, we have trailer parking spaces on both the north side and the south side. A majority of the trailer parking are on the north because that's where the available kind of land is there. We do have one row of trailer park on the south side. Those are, when the cabs pull up, we drop the trailers and then they leave just the trailer component there in the store area. I did want to highlight some of sort of I'll call them sustainable features, but it's hard to go too deep into sustainability with industrial buildings. But I will highlight that we have a very well-insulated, we've obviously being held to the highest standards with the latest building codes, so significantly insulated, much improved as compared to existing Intel facilities, which are obviously built at a different time. So this will be best in class in terms of the construction of the facility itself. We're also going to be held to some very high standards in terms of electric use. This will be 25% electric, which I was reminded by our astute energy modelers that basically means that when we're at peak heating load, 90% of that heat, that source, will come from electricity versus fossil fuels. So much improved from the existing conditions of the 700,000 square feet or so that is there today, that we're running off boilers and using natural gas. We will still have natural gas at the facility, but a lot more is coming from electric sources. We also are committed to essentially building this building such that it is 100% ready for solar on the roof. We know there's challenges with interconnection, but we know that may change over time, so these buildings last a long time. So we are building this facility such that if and when we're ready for solar, we can add solar to this facility. We have a very robust stormwater system on here that Austin will eventually get his opportunity to share, and obviously some enhanced landscape features in and around the property. I've included this slide just to highlight some of the truck circulation. I think it's hard to tell when you just look at the pavement and the plans of the building, and I don't know if it's readable, but the blue is showing the way that trucks will enter the site and circulate. Obviously, all trucks are going to come and go from the Reed Road Technology Drive entrance that exists today. There'll be no truck traffic coming or going from the Marlborough Street side. Additionally, it's just worth noting that when trucks leave the Reed Road, when they leave this facility, they will be required to take a right-hand turn. There will be no left-hand turns. All of that will continue. I think that was agreed upon and understood from the prior process, and obviously will continue with this. And all the trucks are looking to get to the 294-95 in the tune, so it works well. But if you're entering the site, you can see that the trucks they'll move up to the limits of the former ring road. They'll find their way through the guard stack. The other thing that I just want to highlight, the guard stack is located here. We've done that intentionally to pull all the trucks into the site. We don't want any situation where, trucks caught up at Reed Road. So they have the opportunity to get into the site, and they go through the guard stack. I think it's 1,600 linear feet or so away from the Reed Road entrance. So we've done that intentionally. And then important to note that we've held this counterclockwise circulation. This is an important element to operating these facilities successfully. So we've maintained that, and then trucks then leave the same way they came in and out. It's not highlighted, but I'll walk you through it on the laser pointer. Vehicular traffic for employees coming through cars will come, the majority will still come through the Reed Road entrance. That's what we've sort of worked through in our traffic analysis. They will have the ability to come and go through Marlborough Street. They're able to get there via this pathway to this building, to this parking field here, as well as up through this great road here. And the reason is this is safe that way is because obviously we have some grade change that we have to work through with the project. So, stepping back one more time, I think folks understand the Intel campus pretty well and what is in and around the Intel campus. Of course, we're fully aware of the multiple neighborhoods that abut this property. And then we also know that many of you participated in the review of the Portland proposal. And I think a lot of the questions we've received, either in some of our neighborhood meetings or via email, have been about how we compare to Portland. What are the similarities and what are the differences? So we put together a series of slides that I think tries to help explain, and pictures worth 1,000 words. So this shows the Intel campus, and then we are going to layer on top of that what the Portland development looks like 3 years from now. I think I have that statistic correct. Portland, as you all, I think many of you know, proposed a 1.3 million square foot facility. And what's really interesting about it is they, in order to get that shape and scale to kind of fit within the site, they did have to kind of pull the building to the south and to the east. While they're still kind of within the footprint of much of the former Intel development area, they weren't able to really centralize the building, which didn't offer much opportunity for buffering or any other vegetation around the building itself. And then when you layer in our project, and before I move this to the next slide, I also want to highlight that in order to get the program to kind of meet the grading that was required to build this building, they had a limit of work line. That's the sort of red dot. Let me see if I can do this. Red dot that follows along this path. They included an additional trailer storage area to the north outside of the ring road, and in doing that, they were taking down a lot of the vegetation that existed along the edge of the property to the north off the page. You can really see it, and you can see that limit of disturbance line kind of continue in order to achieve the grades needed for the circulation in the building itself. Here's our comparison. There's a lot of layers here, and it's hard to see, so I appreciate everyone bearing with me on this, and we will make sure these slides are available through the board doc site so people can even take a closer look than just looking here tonight. But you can see when we layer in the Boulder proposed building. Austin and I are sharing a name here, National Boulder. So the white box is the National Development Building. layered into this. And again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about siting the building sort of centrally into the site. Again, I understand 950,000 square feet feels big. I understand that. But it was about 25% smaller than the Portman building, which is a significant change and allowed us to pull the building sort of to the middle of the site. So I have a note here. All right. So this is 2D, right? Hard to kind of see grade when you look at these plans from the aerial view. So, and one thing I think that might have been missing when you reviewed the proposal with Portman previously, we've prepared a few sections thanks to Matt and others on the Bowler team that kind of help describe the grading. And I think we'll also try to describe to you all how it feels from your sort of from the adjacent property lines, whether it be the southern property line close to the Quail Run community, sort of the northwest property line close to Westwood, and then we know there's a number of homes along Mulberry Street. So we've done these sections, and we're going to try to walk you through them, and happy, of course, to answer questions after or during our public comment period to explain this a little better. So these are the 5 or so 6 sections we've done. We'll start with section A. And we've done it to bring us back to the comparison of these 3 different programs. So Intel being the top, this is the black square, represents the Intel facility that resided there previously, and its proximity to the southern property line. You can see how close the sort of building itself, as well as the pavement for sort of the loading area in the back there. Portman was pulling away from that location, had the trucking facilities in between, and a very minimal buffer with a sound fence identified. You can see that noted here on the plan. You get to our program, we are significantly pulling the building back close to 500 feet, 490 feet from the property line in this location. I mentioned the vegetative buffer on the south side. You can start to see that come into fruition here. And we've got some grade changes within there, along with some plantings, a fence that sits atop that berm. And then we also want to highlight how we've studied the grading pretty significantly out here. And we have about a 16-foot reduction in grade as you move your way down here out to our building. So drastically different when you look at that in comparison to some of the existing conditions in the Portman program. Moving our way towards the east, this is section B. On our P plan over here. Again, we've got the Intel building, the existing conditions of the pavement, pretty proximate to the southern property line. The Portman proposal and how significantly closer the building was there with a minimal buffer. We again made it intentional. We listened to the prior process and the comments that we heard and found a way to bring in a bit more buffer, again grading, and some grade change, which also helps with sound attenuation and other visual attenuation to the buildings from the site. I'm going to click through this quickly. Similar story, like section C. Felt it really important, given the proximity of those homes, to really show various locations where we could cut a section of the site to kind of demonstrate this for you. With section D, just as you work your way further to the east, our building ends. You still see Portman's building there, but again, I think the point has been provided. So with section E, this is a relationship to the sort of Westridge property line. I think this one's telling in that, it can be very, very difficult, I think, to visually see from the Westwood community as you look up that hill. I don't think you're going to see the operations or see the buildings. You understand that there's other sound attenuation to think about and consider, and perhaps lighting, and we'll talk through some of those details in upcoming meetings. But I thought this was a helpful graphic just to show that line of sight will be difficult to see. But it also highlighted that limit of disturbance that we talked about earlier with Portman, really pulling their development space to you. This is much, much different from that, and will be much further away, even though our building has become a little bit closer as compared to Portland in the way that this project lays out. And the Marlboro neighborhood, I think I heard a few times in the process 3 years ago, I think folks from the Marlboro neighborhood had a hard time sort of visualizing what they were going to see from their neighborhood. And I'll say one thing that was important to us when we worked through this in detail is, despite our program being in that location, we also have some stormwater basins that will daylight, if you will. They won't be underground. They'll be ponding. We looked really closely at the Marlboro Street property line. We have a location for some of that stormwater to go. But we also made sure that to keep a lot of the existing vegetation, if you drive down Marlboro Street, I think there's a lot of trees. They've been there for a long time. We have worked really hard to preserve all of that so that the look and feel of Marlboro Street will look very similar. We know that as you get closer to where the entrances on Marlboro Street, you will obviously be able to see the facility from that vantage point. But particularly for some of the homes that are right along Marlboro Street, you know that today you look across that street, you see the vegetation that exists today. We have preserved that. We're intending to preserve that to kind of visually screen our property from the neighborhood. And again, just wanted to hone in a little bit further in a zoomed-in approach to look at that vegetative buffer back into 2D or plan view. It results in an 8-acre area. It's replacing 4 acres of impervious, whether it be Intel's building. You can kind of see it ghosted in behind a little bit in this view. Whether it be the Intel building or the parking fields that once resided there for Intel's use. We're ripping that up, we're putting in a vegetative space, and then again, layering, grading in a fence and a lot of vegetation to kind of provide a much more robust, buffer between the southern property line and our program. One thing that before, and I'm almost done. The mic's in a minute. But I did want to highlight something that we included in our application that I didn't want it to be missed. It sort of feels subtle when you look at the plans that we provided, but that was not intended to be a trick. We wanted to include it, and we did that, as Christina mentioned, we do not have a tenant in this site. We've tried. We have tried for 2 years to find the right tenant. A lot of those tenants arrived and saw 700,000 square feet of existing facilities in the way, and also know that we needed to go through an entitlement process. So we know that we need to work with this community to work through this application. We don't have a tenant, which makes it really hard. We had a crystal ball. It can fully figure out exactly how this is going to look and feel. But we included this area in the proposal as the permissible building area, sort of set the parameters for where the building could be. And so we've done that in a sort of strategic way to think about this facility as sort of the maximum, I would want to call it that. Somebody said worst case scenario. I felt like I shouldn't say that, but it's really true that we're looking at this facility as the most intensive use for the site. We hope that we can demonstrate that within this we are buffering properly, we're doing the right thing from a sound discrimination standpoint, that we're looking at the traffic. We're looking at the traffic as the most intensive use. Randy will have his moment and talk through all of that with the land use code that we selected. But we did this intentionally because we know we're using town resources. We know we need to work through a process collaboratively to bring out really viable, good tenants to the site. It's important to have a little bit of flexibility in order to achieve those goals. And I'll also just end with the fact that we're not intending to build anything speculatively. We're looking to work with the market to find the right tenant and, identify them before we start any type of construction. So with that, it took way longer than I thought, but happy to answer questions during the public comment period. Eric?
Hi everyone, my name is Eric Halverson. I'm a principal with HUD-TV Associates. My firm, we're based in Boston, and we've been around. Next year will be our 45th year in business, and we're sort of founded on working with both public and private sector clients on economic development and market studies and fiscal and economic impacts, which is why I'm here tonight to talk to you a little bit about the numbers. So hopefully you're all wide awake at 8 o'clock, because we're going to go over some numbers tonight. So a little bit about the subject property. I know you've heard from the planning director, and you've also heard from Katie. This is a really important site, both in its size and in its location, and in its historic contribution to the town's, what we'll call the town's fiscal sustainability. When Intel was there and fully operational and fully occupied, it was generating a lot of assessed value and tax revenue from the city, for the town. And as we know, as Intel started to phase out and new plans came about, the value of that property has continued to go down to where it sits today. This is a really important site for the town and for the region, a very marketable site. And when I think about town finances and municipal finances, there's really only a handful of levers that municipalities in Massachusetts have to pull when it comes to balancing the books and making sure that from a capital and operations standpoint, the town can sustain what it has today and the growth and needs that the town might have tomorrow. And this site plays very nicely into making sure that the town can continue to operate as it does today, or even make improvements to the town in the future. So I thought I would just start by walking through a couple of slides to talk a little bit about why this site, I think this site is so critical to the town before we get into the nuts and bolts of the actual fiscal impact analysis and sort of how we went about doing that. So the chart that you see up on the screen shows going back to 2009, which is effectively when Intel was at its peak and the property was generating its highest assessed value at that point in time. You'll see that property was generating just under $70 million in assessed value, so not taxes, but in assessed value. And the breakdown of that was the large majority of that was in the building value, which is the orange line, with a little bit in the land value. That's sort of how an assessed value on a piece of property works. There's a value to the land, and if there's a structure on the land, there's a value to that. So you can see what's happened 2009, 2014, 2019, as occupancy in the Intel campus started to drop, and they started to move their operations elsewhere, and then as selective demolition started happening on the campus, that assessed value, so the value of that property to the town from a tax perspective, continued to go down. According to the town's assessment database, today the value of that property stands probably around $17 million or so. So we went from almost 70 in 2009 to where it stands today at maybe about 15, 16, 17. At its peak, that $68.8 million in assessed value was generating about $1.55 million a year in annual property taxes for the town. What we have done is take a look at the proposed 950,000 square foot industrial building that Katie was mentioning before, and run a valuation scenario on that. We think conservatively, and we did use conservative estimates for this so we didn't sort of overshoot, we think that the assessed value of the building and the land could be in the range of $116 million at full build and full occupancy, generating for the town about $3.1 million in gross property taxes a year. So almost double the amount of taxes even at Intel's high point in 2008. So why do we think this is important? If you've lived in Hudson or any other municipality in the state of Massachusetts, you know that over time municipal budgets don't necessarily come down, they tend to go up. So, and as I mentioned before, there's only a handful of levers that municipalities have to pull in order to balance that budget. As costs go up, you can either cut services, you can increase taxes, or you can try to go out and find new growth, which sort of allows us to go above and beyond Prop 2.5, which is Massachusetts tax law that sort of caps our values. You can see here in the graph how Hudson's total assessed value across the town has changed. Again, going back from 2009, when the town's total assessed value was about $2.5 billion. Fast forward to 2025, that value is probably around $4.25 billion. So a really big adjustment in terms of the town's overall assessed value. The blue line that you see trending downward is the percentage of that assessed value that's attributed to commercial, industrial, and personal property taxes. So we call that CIP. So basically any assessed value that's not associated with residential or other uses. You can see that line is trending downward. Back in 2009, during Intel's heyday, the CIP made up about 18.5% or so of the town's total assessed value. But as residential values skyrocketed, really post-pandemic, that's what's really driving those yellow lines upward toward 2025. The percentage that your commercial and industrial base makes up has dropped down to just a little bit above 12%. On the positive side, when we talk about commercial and industrial development, and from a service perspective, it often takes fewer town services to service commercial and industrial development than it does certainly certain types of residential development. Now, a balanced community needs a little bit of everything, but if we're talking about utilization of town services and budget, usually we want to see a good balance of commercial and residential. And that balance has been trending and shifting downward over time in Hudson. And you're not unique. Many other communities are experiencing a similar phenomenon, particularly post-2020. So as our assessed values are going up and our commercial values are sort of coming down as an overall percentage, we also need to look at what's happening with town finances, because all this together will help us understand taxes and why this property is so important. In 2009, the town's general fund budget, so absent state aid, absent grants, just what your general fund budget is, was just shy of $60 million. Fast forward to 2025, we're now approaching $90 million. So over the time as your assessed value has gone up, also your budget has gone up, and that's attributable to a lot of different cost escalations. One of the challenges that we've had in recent years, and because we're limited by Prop 2.5, we have inflation. If you've been looking at the news in the last couple of years, inflation's going up 3, 4, 5% a year. So that means costs go up, healthcare goes up, the cost to borrow on debt goes up, salaries go up. Right? All these things are going up, capital costs go up, and they're going up faster than what Prop 2.5 can keep us catching up to from a budgetary perspective. So that leaves us in a bit of a predicament where if we're capped by Prop 2.5, what do? Well, we can either cut services, or we can raise taxes, or we have to go out and find new revenue. So as you all know, if you were here recently in Hudson, you did a Prop 2.5 override of about $3.95 million, give or take. So that was one of the ways in which the town decided to raise additional revenue to cover shortfalls in the budget. Interestingly enough, as I mentioned before, this site at full build now, of course it wouldn't have been ready in 2025, but let's pretend that it was. This site could have helped plug some of that $3.9 million gap by contributing $3.1 million roughly or more a year in the annual property taxes, and it would count toward new growth, which you're allowed to go above your Prop 2.5 with new growth. So again, just speaking to the importance of this site. Now, when we talk about increases in assessed value, increases in the general fund, we also need to talk about the impact to residents who own property here and who live here and have to pay property taxes. In 2009, the average single-family tax bill in Hudson was just shy of $4,000 a year on average. Fast forward to 2025, as residential values have gone up, and actually the tax rate has come down over that period of time, but residential values have increased so much that the average tax bill in 2025 is just over $8,000. Again, taxes go up as budgets go up. New growth is one of the primary solutions, again, that Massachusetts communities have to sort of offset some of those increases. Is it going to bring property taxes way down? Nope, I would never make that promise. But what it does help do is to help stabilize things over time and continue to add new growth. So hopefully that was just a little bit of a primer on what we've been looking at with the site and why our team thinks that this site is so important to the town of Hudson. So a little bit about the fiscal impact analysis, where we'll dive into that $3.1 million number a little bit more. So I apologize, it's a little bit smaller than I thought it was going to be. But What we did at the request of the town and national development was to work collaboratively between the town and the developer to create a fiscal impact analysis. What this effectively does at its most basic form is we develop a value, an assessed value, and a tax amount for what we think the property at full build and occupancy would generate for the town. And then on the other side of the ledger, we need to figure out how much is it going to cost for the town to provide services for that development. You have the revenue on one side, the tax revenue, you have the cost on the other. You subtract the two, and hopefully, if we've all done our jobs right, the new development will generate more revenue than it does cost of services, if that makes sense. In order to do that, we worked with the town as well as the developer to generate how much we thought the assessed value and the tax contribution could be from the development based on what national development is planning here. And then we worked very closely with the town and all of the departments to come up with what we thought the service cost would be. To do that, I went through the town's line item budget, the general fund budget, line item by line item, department by department, and took a look at all the costs that the town had and which ones we thought could be attributed to this form of development and which ones might not. I also spent a day here in Hudson doing interviews with all the key department heads to understand from an operational perspective what might this development do to their operations in the community and do they have concerns. So with all that background, I will go into our methodology. So the way that our costing method works is we use what's called an incremental cost approach. So since this site has already been developed before, and it has had uses on it, and it has some level of infrastructure on it, we would assume that the cost to service this development, there's some inherent costs that are sort of already absorbed in the budget from ongoing operations. One example that I like to talk about is if national development gets their approvals and they're able to build 950,000 square foot industrial facility, it's unlikely with that facility that the police department would hire another police chief. No offense. But it is likely that there would be some additional level of call volume coming from that facility. There may be a fender bender in the parking lot or out on Reed Road, or an alarm goes off and you need to send the police department or the fire department over there. So there will be some level of service that needs to be provided. But it doesn't mean they're going to have to go out and hire a new police chief and a fire chief and a deputy fire chief just because of this development. So what we do is we go through the town's budget and we identify all those line items where we say fire chief salary, administration salary, police officer salary, and we say we don't think this is going to increase with the new development, but we do think that this would potentially have an impact or increase with the new development. And we add all those costs up that we think are going to increase with the new development. We call that the incremental cost. And that then becomes our cost to serve the proposed development. On the revenue side, we have to figure out what the value of this future development is once it's fully built and occupied. And to do that, we talked with the town's assessor, and their suggestion was to use what's called an income-based approach, which is where we would take the square footage of the building, we would calculate what the rent per square foot would be, and for this, we looked at similar facilities around the region. There are a couple of other large-scale industrial facilities in nearby towns in the 495 belt, so we looked at the rent. We looked at what the current vacancy rate is for industrial buildings, how much it might cost national development to operate that as a percentage of the rent that they get, and then what's called the capitalization rate, which is a way to value the building. We have the valuation calculations on the screen if you want to go through them. I'm sure this will be posted too, and you can look at it when you're ready. But essentially, we use all that information to come up with a valuation for the property. That's how we came up with the $116 million in assessed value and the $3.1 million in taxable income, again, when the building is fully built and occupied. So that gives us our revenue side of the equation. The other thing that we were asked to do was to create a valuation for a hypothetical residential scenario. There have been some talk about whether the site, I think as Katie mentioned, should go one way or another in terms of your proposed use. So just to kind of illustrate how a residential scenario might compare from a fiscal standpoint to an industrial scenario, we also ran the same analysis on the 500-unit residential development. Given the size of the site at 150 acres, you could fit quite a number of units there, so we picked the number 500 just so we had something to run. And the value of that residential development in those 500 units is just shy of $3 million, just shy of $3.1 million. So actually very similar in terms of its tax contribution at full build. But what you'll see later on the cost side, it's a very different story. So a little bit of an audible, hopefully you can all see that, okay. So the next step after looking at the revenue generation for the industrial and the residential is to look at the cost side. So as I mentioned, when we went through the line item budget, we identified the costs that we felt were fixed, that probably wouldn't change with new development versus ones that were what we call incremental, that we did think would change. To make our analysis a little bit more digestible, so that we don't show you like 1,000 line item budgets or budget line items, we compressed them into 5 categories. So I'll actually start in a different order. So we do police separate and we do fire separate because in my experience, everybody wants to see those called out. We do public works separate, and then everything that's not police, fire, and public works goes into general government. So that would be the planning department, the town manager's department, the select board, everything else, the assessor, gets compressed into general government. And then other would be all of the costs that are not departmental related. So that's everything from the town's capital expenditures on debt, health insurance, liability insurance, retirement pensions. That all goes into the other category. So you can see the total budget for the town side of the ledger, and we'll get to schools in a minute. This is just the town side, is $40.8 million. And of that, we think about 40% of the budget is what we would refer to as incremental, the other 60% being fixed. So we come up with an incremental budget across the whole town of about $16 million. But we need to figure out within that $16 million, what's actually attributable to CIP expenditures, the commercial and industrial, versus what might be attributable to residential. So the way that we do that is we take the assessed value across the whole town and the share of assessed value for residential versus commercial, and that's how we split that out. So we say, of that $16 million of incremental budget, about 88% is driven by residential development, which is the majority of the development and the service generators in town. About 12% of that would be for CIP. Well, I think I can do it this way. Oh, that was can you go back up one? Perfect. Yeah. So on the residential side, because we ran those 2 scenarios for the town, we need to figure out how do we actually allocate that incremental budget to the new 500 households in that hypothetical scenario. So what we do is we take that the $14 million, which is attributed to the residential incremental budget, and we divide it by the total number of households that are here in Hudson today, which is about 8,560. And that gives us a cost per household of about $1,674. So each of those 500 hypothetical units on an annual basis will generate about $1,674 in service cost, which we can then compare to the revenue on a per unit basis to see how that shakes out. On the commercial side, we do a very similar approach, except instead of dividing by households, we divide by the number of employees that are here in the town. And that's public and private sector employees. That's total employment for the town at about just over 9,600. So we take the incremental cost of just shy of $2 million in the budget, we divide it by total employees, and we get a total per employee cost of $207. We also need to figure out, from a 950,000 square foot industrial facility, of which we don't know the tenant yet, how many employees might that actually generate? Because otherwise we don't know what to multiply the $207 by. So we take the 950,000 square feet and we divide it by 1 employee per 750 square foot, which is a standard metric for sort of average industrial users. Now, depending on the tenant, that number could be lower. Let's say it's a facility that uses a lot of robotics for some reason. That number could be lower, resulting in less cost for the town. It could also be higher if it was a different use, resulting in slightly more cost for the town. But on average, that was the number we used. Next slide, please. Okay, I think this is the last slide before we get to the punchline. On the residential side, just again, so we can make a fair comparison, we need to account for education costs. In Massachusetts and in many communities, the school budget is often the largest share of the municipal budget, so it's very important that we take that into account. For the school budget, we did the exact same thing where we went line by line through the town's entire school budget, identified what we thought was an incremental cost versus a fixed cost. You'll notice that the percentage of incremental cost is 71% compared to the 40% for the town. In our experience, school costs are much more variable. As you add a student, there's a lot more services, supplies, and things that go along with adding a student versus adding a new household or another employee in the community, which is why that percentage is a lot higher. So on average, it would cost an incremental cost per student about $15,756. The full cost to educate a student in Hudson today is just over $22,000. That's just taking the full loaded budget and dividing by the number of students in the community. It's about $22,000. So you can see here, we're taking a good percentage of that budget. The other key thing is we need to figure out how many students might come from 500 units. Otherwise, we don't know what to multiply 15,756 by. So to do that, we do a lot of these fiscal impact studies. We work with a lot of school districts. And what we do is we usually ask school districts, if I give you the address of a large multifamily housing development, can you tell me, just no names, no personal information, just how many students live there? And then we pull how many units are there, and we divide the two, and we can figure out how many students per unit are living in a given multifamily development. So we've done this in a couple of communities very recently. Needham, Billerica, Brookline, Winthrop. We just did one in Marlboro. On average, right now, we're seeing about 0.16 students per unit. So that would be about, even though you can't have a 0.6 of a student, but for every 10 units, it's 1.6 students, if that makes the math any easier. 16 students for every 100 units. So if we're talking about 500 units, give or take 50 or 60 students. Okay, so just for the results, this table just walks you through our math. So starting on the left, this is the industrial proposal, the 950,000 square feet. Gross property tax before we take into account any costs, $3.1 million. There's no vehicle registration fees. We assume that the trucks and the trailers are going to be registered somewhere else. If they're not, and they're registered to the business on the site, that's a bonus for the town. CPA taxes is 1% of assessed value, so about $31,000 to community preservation. town cost here, about $244,000 based on what we talked about before. There's no school cost here because industrial and students. And then that results in a net fiscal impact of about $2.9 million annually to the town at full building occupancy. If we look at the residential scenario, as I mentioned, gross property taxes are very similar, almost $3.1 million. Here we would assume that vehicle registration fees are a thing. People who are renting there or living there are going to register their vehicles in HUD-TV, so there's money there. You would get a similar 1% on the CPA taxes, but the town costs are a lot higher. If you remember how much higher, it was about $1,600 versus $207. So the town costs are a lot higher, and then of course the school costs are substantially higher. They go from $0 to $1.1 million. When we subtract those costs out, we end up with a net fiscal impact of about $1.3 million. So still positive, but about half as much as what we see with the industrial, mostly because of the cost side of things. Great.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for taking the time to go through that. And I know we have a lot more to talk about. So we've intentionally created what I'd like to say bite-sized pieces, although an hour and 15 minutes probably is long enough. But we do have a robust presentation on traffic, air quality, teed up for the January 21st, making sure my date's correct, 21st meeting. So know that I know there's a lot of questions around traffic and impact. Feel free to ask them. We may not have all the answers tonight, but we will hear you and we will respond. I've been trying to keep up with some responses in some comment letters to a few of the communities that have reached out. We will keep that up and we will listen as we go along. After the January 21st meeting, I believe it's January 28th or early February. I'm not sure if we have that exact date, but you guys
January 28th.
January 28th, thank you. At that point, we will also share some more information on stormwater and civil details, as well as the results of the sound study. And a lot of that material is also, as Christina mentioned, being reviewed by peer reviewers. So at those presentations, we'll be able to hear from the peer reviewers and hear the comments that have been going on between the consultants. So with that, I don't want to take up any more airtime. I'll bring it back to the board.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Katie, Eric, Christina. A lot of information, boy. I've been looking at this for a couple of weeks, and it's still a lot of information. A couple of things. You heard that we don't have any issue with water, the quantity of water that might be needed on the site. You also heard that Hudson Light and Power has no problem right now delivering the amount of power that might be needed. You did not hear, but our sewer treatment plant has the capacity to handle what they're proposing right now. All right? There are a few things that were asked last time that this board has no control over. Ledge on the site, okay? In all probability, there is going to be drilling and blasting. No one knows for sure yet, but the assumption is going to be yes. Once that happens, state, town have rules and regulations. It goes to the fire chief, and no permit is allowed without going through the fire chief, pre-blast surveys, post-blast surveys, insurance requirements, times he can blast, size of blast. So that will only happen, if it happens, goes through the chief. They said that they do not have a tenant yet. Contaminated material, hazardous material that might go into these buildings. That, the planning board, the town, that goes to the building commissioner, the fire chief again, and the police chief. All right? There is a whole bunch of hoops that anyone that wants to go through that have to jump through, but the planning board does not have any control over that. All right? When the questions start coming, we would like to try to direct the questions of what you've seen tonight and what you anticipate is going to happen tonight. I think at the last meeting we talked a lot about what happened with different huge warehouses throughout the country. Fires, explosions, kinds of response times. Okay, we are trying to just contain ourselves to the 75 League Road site. And I know there has been a few other things in town that might come about, but until they're brought before us, what if just can't happen. Also, when you ask your questions, if you can, I don't know whether Katie and Eric are going to try to answer questions tonight. I will leave it up to them. All right? Sometimes they can answer them shortly or quietly or quickly. If not, this is all being recorded. They'll all be taken down, and they will be answered. Okay? And again, like I said at the beginning, we might not all like the answers, but we will get the answers. All right? So tonight, if we want to start asking a few questions, because we have about an hour left of time, I think Katie and Eric talked about, you'd like to have it traffic? Is that what you want to start with, Katie? Or
I think we would love to just hear from the public and hear their questions, and we'll try to, like you mentioned, we'll try to address as much as we can tonight. We do have members of the team here that might come in and join us to answer those questions. The things we can't answer, we'll take note of and we'll respond to at the next meeting.
all right, thank you. And just before I open up to the public, I didn't know if any member of the planning board would like to comment on anything, make a statement, ask a question, or David? Nothing yet. Okay, so just like the last time, if you just come up to one of the microphones, I believe there's 4 of them. Okay, and Marco, you were first last time. You might as well be first again.
Okay, can you hear me? Is this on? Yes? Okay. So my name is Marco DiMartino. I live at 47 Stevens Road in Hudson. That's in the Westridge condominium, which abuts the National Development site. And I only have one question, but I do have a few statements. The first thing we'd like to do from Westridge is actually thank National for all the information they've given us so far. It's been really great. We've had a pretty good relationship. Then, I would like to make a few statements. So, we do expect to work collaboratively with the town and National to satisfactorily address our specific safety concerns from the impact of traffic at Westridge Road and Technology Drive intersection, as well as any other issues that come up as we work through the plan. This is not new to any of you. We do understand that the site represents clear revenue for the town and all of us because it reduces our taxes, right? While working to make this happen, we request that the town and National Development work side by side with the abutters to make sure that all safety and quality of life issues are addressed before the plan is approved. Our real concern is that we don't rush to judgment only to find out 18 months after it, when all the traffic starts flowing, that we run into significant problems. While we do have other concerns, I believe, and I believe most of the people in Westridge believe, that we're working satisfactorily to solve those problems. So, I wanted to say that. And the last question I have is for Eric. So, Eric, here's the question. I saw all the work that was done, and I think it's great. My question is, have you taken into account the amount of tax revenue you will lose from all the abutters when the valuation of their houses decreased by 20% or 25% when you build that building? You don't have to answer it now, but I think as it comes out, I don't know that it's a large number, but I think it's something that should be accounted for.
Do it wasn't something we were specifically asked to look at, but it's certainly something we can talk about.
There's probably 450 or 500 houses that are bought.
Kate Marcello, Autumn Drive, resident of Quail Run. I have a question for Katie in terms of the $950,000, and we know that this is a site review plan. If you were to find a prospective tenant who didn't need 950,000 square feet, are you willing to bring the size down? As a society, we seem to, would you like fries with that? Would you like cola with that? We don't need to supersize things any more than is absolutely necessary. And with 172 bays, the tractor trailers, if there's any way to minimize that from a traffic perspective, a noise perspective, light perspective, that would be something that I personally would be very happy that it is being considered. Because 950,000, just being the largest isn't necessarily being the best that you can do. So, that's one. My other concern is traffic, and that is everybody keeps saying, from what I've read anyway, of some of the preliminary traffic information is that it's less than what Intel was. Intel was more cars than trucks, and Hudson has grown since Intel was at its peak. Traffic has increased without Intel being there. Technology drives, trying to maintain a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit is almost impossible. So from a safety perspective, with what I think it was, it's about 60 tractor-trailer trucks during the morning hours, along with school traffic, along with people who were trying to get to 495 or 290 for their own work. It's going to be a traffic nightmare. Now, we've heard in the past, oh, no, it won't have any impact. It won't have any impact. That's what Portman said. Nope, it won't have an impact. People who lived in this area when Intel was at its peak, it was a nightmare. Trying to take left turns, trying to get out during peak rush hours. So I know that your traffic study is underway. I'm just urging you to take that into consideration, that traffic is more prevalent today than even then, and tractor trailers carry a whole lot more weight and more fatalistic outcomes, or not fatalistic, but fatality outcomes than perhaps automobile to automobile. So from a safety, an overall safety perspective for Hudson, I think that really needs to be studied.
Thank you for the comments. Can I take 30 seconds just to respond? No, thank you for those comments. I think your first portion of the comment was about the scale of the facility, and if we're considering something that looks different than what's up on the screen right now. The answer to that is yes, and that is why it's so important to us to include the permissible building area to essentially give us a little bit of flexibility in the site plan review process. Again, we've included this program as a way to really look at what we see as the highest, the most intense use of the site. We made it harder for ourselves intentionally, right, to look at how the site can be used, make sure that we provide the adequate, separation, buffering, visual, looking at the traffic in great detail. I won't take Randy's thunder, but I'll take a little bit of it. We have also looked at this project very differently than the way Portman did. We used a very different land use code, and Randy will go into a very detailed explanation on that. But I appreciate the comments on safety and the network in and around this location. We're looking closely at that, and we'll continue to do so and be ready to talk more about how we look at traffic at the next meeting. But your comments are appreciated and noted, and we're going to keep working through that.
Thank you.
My name is Susan Lally. I live at 11F Autumn Drive, which is part of the Quail Run community. I live on the infamous southern boundary. I open my patio door to the dining room, and I am going to be looking at tractor trailers parked. I'm going to look at loading docks. I'm going to hear them. That's what I'm concerned about. That's what my neighbors, the other 49 residents along the southern property line, are concerned about. That we are going to have to deal with the noise, the light, the exhaust. Now, I understand you've done some major renovations, I'm not sure that's the right word, but than Portland did. They were just going to come in and it was, we're here, take it or leave it. You did meet with us. I was very honored to meet with you, Katie, and your boss. I was at the meeting back in January of 2024 when there were 3 of us from Quail Run and 3 people from Westridge. And you listened to us, and we told you what we were afraid of and what we would like. I understand, sort of, the economy, the economics of things. You've spent a lot of money to buy this building. Well, you know what? We spent a lot of money to buy our condos. We spent millions of dollars. We didn't spend millions, most of us. Well, maybe some people at Westridge might have. They've gone up in value. Ours haven't gone that way. But that's our future. And so, as Marco said, yeah, our property values are going to go down. And what's going to happen to us? Who's going to want to buy our property when we need to move on somewhere else because we can't live independently anymore in our homes? Our property values are going to be pennies on the dollar instead of the nice increases that we've seen over the past few years. We've had a few people who have paid unbelievable amounts, and they've just found out about this new project. They didn't know about it. They're in shock. And so that's what we ask you to consider. Why we can't do something different. It's just, that's the question that everybody keeps asking. And I heard your answer. But did you consider that you're going to lose tax dollars? That's one of my questions that I have. Our property values are going to go down, so our taxes are going to go down. And you're going to lose our money. We pay over $1.2 million from Quail Run, from individual 150 units. We calculated it out, a group of us, not to mention the money that Quail Run as a community pays. Westridge pays way more because their condos are worth more. So, we're not just a bunch of old geezers on the hill. That's what they said on Facebook, and I'm not accusing you of that. But some people said, oh, those geezers on the hill, they stopped Portland from coming and bringing in valuable tax revenue. No, we stopped thousands of trucks up and down all of our streets. And this hall was full because we started something at Quail Run, and we alerted people to the fact that Hudson wasn't going to be Hudson anymore. The best main street in America was going to disappear if you're going to have all these trucks or trailers coming down and around. They're not going to follow the rules and take a right turn. Are you going to have a police officer sitting there to make sure that they don't go the wrong way? Probably not. Just like they don't obey the Jake break rule. So, I don't know what else. I'm upset. And maybe I'm being too emotional about it and not thinking financially. But I think, Eric, you said that people don't usually get a decrease in their residential property taxes when you just spoke a minute ago, just because this community, this project is coming. So all the people that are on Facebook saying, yeah, build it, so that our property taxes go down. That's not going to happen. Our property taxes won't go down. Our roads are going to be destroyed. We're going to have thousands of trucks and whoever in our backyards. And so I have no questions. I just have comments. They haven't changed since I stood here back in 2022. I do appreciate what you've tried to do, but I still don't. I'm not laying down and playing dead. I can't. So thank you for your presentation, but I'm against it.
Gentleman up in the back, yes, sir.
Excuse me. Bob Arcangeli, 17 Hastings Road. I don't know if you realize that Westridge Road is actually the only in and out for our entire development. It's basically our driveway. And so I'm very interested in your plan for integrating up to 75 trucks an hour with the fact that you have to get in and out of our development. And also the fact that this is going to cause traffic jams, and I'm very concerned about the fact that ambulances, police cars, everything else is going to be stuck. They're not going to get there in time. You know, people may be hurt because of a traffic jam and the ambulance can't get there. The other thing I have is for Eric. Eric, if you really want to change the numbers so they're more in favor of residential, just treat them like they treat us. We pave our own roads, we plow our own roads. We can't have kids that go to school. We're over 55 development. Just for your information. That's it.
Thank you. Young lady in the back.
Hi, my name is Beth. 5 Appleton Drive. Just a couple of quick questions for you. Thank you for your presentation. That was very helpful, very informative.
Name and address?
Yep, Beth Langlois, 5 Appleton Drive.
Thank you.
So my first question is, again, I'm on Appleton. Marlboro is just sort of in my backyard. And so all of the tearing down of the facility is very loud. We hear it all the time. I'm curious, how long would you anticipate the building of the new property to be, and would it be just as loud? Would you anticipate it to be not as loud, but stronger repairs, especially in the winter?
That's a great question. So given that we don't know the tenant, we don't have an exact answer for you, but I can say we've studied this. We've built industrial-type facilities in the past. They typically take about a year, 12 to 14 months to build. But again, that will be refined as we understand the type of development, exactly what the building will entail, and we'll know more kind of at that time. And fully appreciate, number one, thank you for living through some of this demolition activity, and understand that, you know, there's obviously some impacts to the construction.
I have one more question, sorry.
Go ahead.
Also, a concern of mine, and my husband's always has been, we call it the 85 connector right over past South and Southern to get onto the highway. There's no barrier in between the two lanes. People go very fast, you know. I have a teenage daughter, brand new driver, goes to work that way every day. It terrifies me. Add in a bunch of tractor-trailer trucks. I think that's a big concern, obviously, of several people. And so I'm just wondering, what I've been told is that it's a state road, so I don't believe that Hudson has any effect on, changing that. And so is there any way to appeal to the state to add a barrier or to make that more safe?
I'll take that question. Yes, you are correct. The Route 85 connector is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation. And as I mentioned during my presentation, I think you may have, I don't think you were here. I think I saw you walk in a little late. So the Commonwealth permitting agencies also are going to play a role in the review of this proposal. They have to reinitiate the NEPA process, which is the state environmental review process, and DOT will be issuing an indirect access permit, and through that process they will be analyzing all of the impacts to the state highway system as well, and those will be, and thank you for your comment and suggestion, and the Commonwealth can require national development as part of their what's called the Section 61 finding through that process to implement mitigation, and we'll have a separate agreement. But yes, that would be done through the Commonwealth. But I intend to, once we get to the traffic piece, to bring the Commonwealth to us so that we're having a coordinated conversation with the town. And I happen to have worked at Mass DOT a long time ago, so I know some of those folks. So we're going to bring them in with us, so we're all kind of working together on that issue.
Okay, sorry, one last follow-up question. So are you saying that seems likely, given the size of the facility and the trucks, that seems like something the state may?
I don't know what Mass DOT will require. That is completely within their jurisdiction. I mean, we can strongly make the case, but they will make whatever choice they want for the state highway system based on their needs. But again,
we would like to bring Mass DOT into our process so we can discuss it together and bring up, the recommendations. But ultimately, they will, typically they'll say to settle their state highway the state highway issues outside of a process like this, but we're going to bring them in, and we can make that recommendation, whether or not they go forward with it.
And could residents have any part of that conversation?
MEPA, through the MEPA comment process?
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Right.
The same traffic study will kind of be refined and submitted as they revisit the MEPA process. Okay. Thank you.
The gentleman here on my right.
Christopher Yates, 14 Causeway, just off Marlborough Street. My question, and seems to be addressed somewhere here, was the connector and the actual interface between all this traffic that would be generated, tractor-trailer traffic. I have noticed that Hudson has improved the Technology Drive Washington Street intersection and kept it away from the new rotary there. But it's the 85 connector and the 290 terminus that happens there at 495 that baffles me to think that all that truck traffic can actually funnel into that. And I understand the state is going to make their call, but as far as developing a site goes, do you have a contingency available if they do not approve 177 days for your new facility?
In terms of the traffic component?
No, I mean, if you can't move your vehicles, your tractor trailers, and you've spent all this effort into designing this plan and eventually this building.
Well, we've taken, and we'll get into the traffic in upcoming meetings, and looking forward to kind of taking a deeper dive because it will take some time to review all of that. We have studied this. We used a much more intensive land use code, as they refer to it, with ITE, and we're seeing that through that study that we're able to process these trucks. And we should dive into all of it. I know there's a lot of safety concerns, a lot of questions about 85C. I think we can take a much deeper dive into all of that at the next meeting, and I appreciate the comment because we'll make sure we address those comments at the next one.
Gentleman here on my left.
Stephen Bonica, a butter at 24 Marlborough Street. I'm a little bit curious when you showed the sight lines from Marlborough Street. Were you saying that we shouldn't be able to see the building, or you don't know with the vegetation not coming down? I don't know, because the original Portman would have, I assume, been massive on that hill from our perspective. And it's hard to tell what you think, if you have an idea.
Yeah. So we did one section, sort of adjacent. It's probably really hard to see on here.
You're roughly pointing at my house, probably.
Oh, okay.
There. I'm
so
just
you're right there. What are the odds?
To the north of that red line.
Right here, and obviously you can sort of see it in this T plan here that we've included. This is sort of approximately where the existing curb cut is for the Intel operation. That is not changing. We're actually narrowing the curb cuts a little bit because they're very wide. They don't need to be that wide, so we're intending to narrow them just to kind of control traffic a little bit better. But we did cut the section through the site, kind of like you said, it looks like it's proximate to your home. And I did walk through the side kind of quickly. So if you can sort of picture this kind of site, the other in the vertical direction here, you can see the Intel building. So you have some context for how that feels from your home today. There's a significant amount of vegetation that runs along.
Currently, with the vegetation from my house, I cannot see Intel.
Yep.
What I'm having a hard time understanding is with Portman, I was pretty sure I was going to because they were raising the land and then building out.
Yep. I think it's going to be very hard to see our facility from your home. One thing that we are actively working on is some we're calling photo simulations. We went through and took a number of just regular photographs, not only on Marlborough Street, but also Proxima took the run into Westridge to do just that, to take pictures of what it looked like today, and then utilize sort of 3D modeling and trying to not only just do sections here, but also sort of slowly simulate what it's going to look and feel like. We'll have those in the upcoming meetings to kind of share. They're still being refined a bit to make sure we have our grading correct. But I think that will help describe that, and when we get to that point, I'll share it with you. But as far as I can tell right now, because we're keeping a lot of the existing vegetation along that roadway, and our program doesn't really start until much further back, that is going to help with the visual view up and looking up and towards the hill. You will see, when you get closer to the driveway, just kind of like you can see today, you can sort of look up and you can see some trees, and then you can sort of tell the buildings from the back. The Intel building is further back. Our building will be closer. So you will be able to see the building as you drive by or look in from the curb cut itself.
Thank you. I also was kind of curious if I had a similar question about build. It's going to take about a year to 2 years to build it, but that's only once you find a tenant.
That's right.
Well, do you have an expectation? Obviously, you can't predict the future, but if you're stated you're having a problem finding a tenant at this point because you haven't completed demolition and they're not really interested in doing it at this stage. Right. Do you have an expectation of when you will know likely tenants?
It's a good question. I will say that a lot of this is market-driven, right? So we're, seeing a lot of actual uptick in interest, just the general market, not just here in Hudson, but we're seeing more volume and sort of demand come back into the industrial market. And like I mentioned before, they are the market generally, we've got a lot of favorable comments about this location, about the scale of the location, again, all the infrastructure. I can't predict exactly a time on that, but we are going to continue to actively market the site, and our brokers are thrilled that we're here before you all tonight because we're now sharing more plans out there in the sort of market. So we'll know more soon.
One follow-up to that is, once you do have a tenant, what would end up happening is the plans change, right? If they don't come in and write this exact building, you said you will modify it. Does that change the timeline on when you start building? Does it change this process? Do we have to sit here and listen to this again when they change it? I don't know. What happens from there?
If the building is the question if the building is built and then it's changed later? Is that
no, if they come in and say, you know what, we actually want this to be different. Because you haven't built it yet, right? You're proposing this as what you expect the tenant to want.
That's right. So if it's something beyond what we've included in this proposal, I don't know, I can't predict exactly, but let's just say they wanted a much, much taller facility than what we've included in this proposal, then I would say that is something we need to come back for. I mean, Christina is the gatekeeper on what is considered. I don't know the right term.
No, definitely not a gatekeeper. So as I know this is a tough concept. I totally understand that. So if there is a proposal, they find some tenants that maybe only need 400,000 square feet, they could presumably provide a 400,000 square feet foot building. And another tenant comes in and wants another 400,000 square foot building. And it's within that permissible building area, they do not need to come back to the planning board. But if a tenant comes in and says, I want 1.5 million square feet, everything comes back to you. That would have to go through a public review. That's a major amendment to any site plan approval. I know it's really hard to do this on spec and to kind of understand, what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. It could be one building. It could be two buildings. It's really dependent on the market forces, moving through this process as well. So, they're trying to market the site as they're going through this permitting process. So for workers, folks, and, they want to make sure that the site is approved and permitted, before they're willing to, invest money. That's just kind of how this works. But if it's beyond the 950,000 square feet or beyond the permissible building area, that it comes back to the planning board. But in terms of how the building may look, I mean, these are just going to be industrial buildings. It's not.
I'm hoping I'm not going to see it, but...
Yeah, I totally understand that point, so.
It dawned on me, just one final question. Is the intention to build it and rent it, or are you selling it to whoever potentially is going to be the occupant?
That's also a good question, one that I don't have the full answer for, but our objective with this development, as I mentioned before, we not only develop but we construct. That is something that we would like to do with this future tenant and operator within the market. Cannot predict the future, but we would like to own and operate if that hopefully happens. So we don't have a definitive answer on that.
Thank you very much.
I believe this gentleman here on the left.
Matt Murrah, 3 Gately Ave, formerly also lived on Mall Road. I really appreciate your sensitivity to the site and how you've approached it. I know some people may not feel that way, but I do see an effort, and I want to recognize that. I did hear that you were looking at, I understand that in a municipality as Hudson, with our electric company, solar is difficult for, payback reasons. Sustainability is important to me, and if there is a large building like this going into town, I'd really be interested in hearing what other things you may be considering, such as geothermal or other green building techniques. Don't have to answer that now. I know there's more presentations. Just something to consider. Thank you.
Young lady up here in the back, please.
Yes, hi, my name's Hillary Salmon. I live at 478 Main Street in Hudson. I empathize with everyone expressing the traffic concerns. Living on Main Street, we have fire trucks, police cars, heavy equipment going by every day. So I empathize with everyone's concerns about that. One of my questions is, and I'm asking this because of the road conditions around my house, is we have, with the fire trucks coming through every day, there are a considerable number of potholes that the DPW has to come and scab over effectively, regularly, to make sure that there's no damage to the equipment. It has road maintenance and that sort of thing been talked about for the traffic considerations.
Yes, we have actually included in our traffic analysis a look at specifically Reed Road in terms of pavement details, and we can include that in our presentation and share a little bit more of what Randy has worked through. We actually engaged, beyond Randy at VHB, they have a sort of roadway pavement group that analyzes this very specifically, so we have actually included some information in our report and can present on that.
Thank you. Yeah. And I just have one other question about the tenant engagement. When it comes to manufacturing, and I know it's tough, is there a specific industry of manufacturing? There's a lot of growth in Massachusetts with the different areas, pharmaceutical, electronics, or, different types. Are you engaging all? Is there a specific area that National Development frequently works with?
Sure. We do work very closely with a third-party brokerage company that helps kind of market the site for us. Every time we have a call, I learn something new about what's going on in the manufacturing world. I'll mention, without naming names, we did talk with, for example, a water bottling operation, ultimately looked to a different facility. I know there's a lot of green technology companies that are here in Massachusetts, could be a candidate for this location again because of its ability to obtain power and water. So those things are attractive to the manufacturing sort of sphere, and we're continuing to kind of work with the market that's out there and bring this property to those groups. So I don't think I give you a great answer, but I'm learning more along the way, and
yeah, great. Thank you.
Young lady in the back, please.
Phyllis Novik on Starley Lane in Quail Run. As I was reading over the materials for the meeting tonight, I noticed it said warehouse, distribution center. Is it possible that this warehouse could become a distribution center? Because a distribution center with the same number of tractor trailers and then thousands of smaller trucks going in
and going all through the neighborhoods to deliver is going to be a different story entirely. So is it a possibility that this would morph into a distribution center?
So one thing I just wanted to mention, one thing I've learned is that a lot of those distribution centers are a much smaller scale facility. So typically, the fulfillment or distribution tend to be smaller in scale. So one benefit, I would say, of having some scale here is that it may attract a different type of user, which is more warehousing. Again, I don't have a tenant. I don't know the answer. But we are looking at how this site would operate, not only within the site itself, but again, looking at traffic and mitigating for sound and other things, looking at it from a warehouse distribution center as well as manufacturing. So that's all kind of included in our analysis of the site. Do you want to mention?
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So there is a possibility
Yes.
that it could end up being a distribution center with not only tractor trailers coming in, but small delivery trucks, hundreds of them coming in at the same time going in and out.
We should dig into I know you're mentioning some numbers. We should look at in detail the traffic analysis at the next meeting so that we can sort of provide some information on how that traffic analysis looks and understand the use and the traffic that goes along with it. So we'll certainly provide that at the next upcoming meeting.
And people who live in the town of, I forget now, but in a town where there is a distribution center, they said they can't get gasoline because the small trucks are in the gas stations, and they can't get into a fast food restaurant because all the drivers are in getting their lunch. And they said that there's no regulation on the small delivery trucks like there is with the large trucks.
Appreciate that comment. We'll look a little further into that.
Thank you. Marco, again.
Hey, not really premise. My question is actually to the board. So most of the questions have really been lately around the envelope, the height, the size, the traffic, whatever. Is the envelope as we see it today, what is your requirement for national development having to come back to the board if that envelope changes?
When you say the envelope, you mean the 950,000 square feet?
Well, yeah, we know that if it goes to 1 million square feet.
Well, if it goes up at all, they must come back.
Well, let's talk about the height of the building. Supposing Katie gets
There's going to be a list of conditions when the plan is approved.
Okay.
Okay, and we're going to list those conditions. Now,
I'm not worried about a foot. I'm worried about 10 feet.
okay,
I got it.
all right.
We actually, the town of Hudson, do not have height restrictions and are codified in our zoning. That's not to say the board can't talk about it and can't discuss it, but we actually don't have any. The only zoning district that has height restrictions is actually in the downtown.
Okay.
But I'm not saying the board can't talk about it.
And we can't assign it, or we can assign it as a condition?
We do not have the height restriction. I agree with that. But there's no reason why we can't put a condition on what we're approving, okay? Only to trigger that they must come back. Okay. Now, everyone should realize there could be 3 buildings up there.
I got it.
No more than 950,000 square feet. They're going to market this the best they can.
I'm good.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I just wanted to get it on the table.
Well, if you're good, then the whole world must be going in the right direction. Thank you. Young lady here on my right.
My name is Janice Habermel. I live at 4C Rotherham Way in Quail Run. I'm going to take us on a totally different tangent because I'm not sure I understand if this wasn't or isn't still a possibility. Is there any reason that you couldn't have that property rezoned to do make housing available? Housing is a huge problem throughout the United States. and we're no different. So I'm just curious if that's a question.
No, and I sort of touched on this a little bit, but given our sort of what we do at National, we do residential, we do multifamily, we do seniors, we're very familiar kind of with that product type. We did look at that, and we looked closely at that, and we looked at sort of what we call the highest and best use for the site. It's zone industrial, but that's not we change zoning, right? We often go through town meeting processes, we work with communities to change the zoning all the time. We are a believer that the best and highest use for this site is an industrial warehouse distribution manufacturing, and that a lot of that speaks to the market that's out there. I mean, we know that Intel operated there successfully for a number of years. Obviously, that has changed, and it's looking to be redeveloped. And for a lot of the reasons I talked about tonight, we've honed in on this as a warehouse sort of distribution manufacturing type facility. We did look at residential, but it doesn't have the same value as an industrial type project.
But if you put that up against the abutters, including the daycare center, strikes me that has a weight that needs to be considered, and I'm just curious if that has been thought of, as opposed to just going with the industrial answer.
No, and I appreciate the comment. I know we've heard from others tonight that are very concerned about having adequate approach to this process. Everyone wants to make sure that they can go in their backyard and enjoy their backyard the way they've been enjoying it all these years. I think it's a tall task, but I think we've really worked hard to analyze this in great detail. I think my job is to bring at our upcoming meetings to bring our team together to show these reports, show the analyses we've done, and hopefully share with you what we've learned and how we think this plan does what it needs to do in terms of buffering for sound and buffering for everything else by way of traffic. We'll get into all of those details, and I think we have we know we have concerns here, and we're going to try to work to address them as best we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Mahowski, 6 Wood Street, Hudson. I don't live in the area. I live right off Washington Street, so I know about concerns about traffic. But one thing I've heard about is decrease in values of home values. I don't want an answer now, but I'd like it looked into. Is there any study that has been done that will tell us how much of an assessed valuation or how much valuation is actually lost when one of these developments go in? The only number I heard tonight was 20%. And I don't believe that. In fact, I don't know anybody who would sell their house now for the full assessed value of the town visit. But I would like to know if there's something other than an opinion, some study that shows how much, if any, the valuation of a property goes down when they build of houses in an industrial zone when they develop that industrial zone. Thank you.
Thank you. I see 4 people standing up at the microphone, and that'll be it for tonight. Young lady in the back, please.
Thank you. Renee Pianta, 30 Marlborough Street. First, I wanted to thank you. The tone and tenor of this meeting has been drastically different than what we've experienced in the past. It does sound like you've reached out to the community. Intel was a great neighbor. We loved them. I've been here for 20-some-odd years. And they had a great community manager. She reached out. She talked to residents all the time about anything that was going to happen out there in town. And so it sounds like you have done that with the Quail Run and the Westridge folks. And I just want to say I think those of us on Marlborough Street would appreciate having the same kind of outreach so that our questions or concerns can be addressed in advance too. That would be appreciated. Happy to be the point of contact with that. Just following up on the question about the distribution center that happened, this woman here just asked. If this does become a last mile distribution center, and we've got these little sprinter vans running around, from a traffic perspective, is that considered a truck, or is that considered an automobile? And would that change how vehicle flows into the property. And that might not be an answer you have today. That could be whatever.
I'm looking at Randy, and he's going to include that in his update.
Well, that's what I was just going to, we haven't heard the traffic. We have a traffic study that is going to be presented, all right?
Next meeting.
And we're asking questions that might be answered. We might not like the answers, but they might be answered in the traffic study. See, that's why I wanted to get the study started before we started the what-if question.
Okay, I'm fine waiting for an answer for the next meeting. No
Right.
problem.
Now, again, we talked about leaving here promptly at 9:30. I said there was going to be 4 more people, and now there's 5. Okay?
And 2 have spoken.
Okay, all right. A super short question. Okay. The young man in the back here. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Hey, Patrick Taylor, 50 Walnut Street. I have a quick question. So over in Shrewsbury, recently there was a similar project, the UPS warehouse, this number was 845 square foot, and the developer contributed $5 million in order to do traffic improvements around the site for the increased traffic. The question may be answered with the traffic study, but is National Development Plan and any contributions to Hudson in order to fix future potential traffic issues around Reed Road, West Ridge? That's what they're
There will be mitigation issues discussed again. See, we started questions before we got all the presentations, and I know that, but there are going to be mitigation issues discussed, if not during the traffic study, when we get together. Yes, the answer to that question is yes. All right? To what extent, I haven't heard the traffic study yet, or the board hasn't. Okay, but there is coming. Okay, Christina's telling me it's available on...
The traffic impact study that was filed as part of the site plan filing is available on the public document library. I know our website is not intuitive. Please email me. I'll put out links on our departmental Facebook page, but you can email me, call me, and I can direct you to where all the documents live, including Eric Halverson's report and all the other supporting documentation.
Thank you. Gentleman here on my left.
Hi, Dan Pearson, 29 Vinyl Street, which means no, I'm not in the butter. But this thing, as I initially heard it described the use as industrial and warehousing, now distribution center has come up. It seems naively to me that 177 semi-parking slots is vast overkill for an industrial site. Maybe not for a warehousing site. And I guess I have 2 related questions. One is, does this mean you're biased toward warehousing? And secondly, if it is industrial manufacturing, does that mean the number of truck slots probably would go down?
The answer is yes. So if we look at different users, we learn more about how they operate, we will, and we address sort of a sort of cap, right, with this program. We're using the most intensive look at the site. If we have a potential tenant that comes in and does not need that many loading days, we would obviously reduce from there. So we would meet their needs but stay below the 177 that's shown.
I believe, I haven't completely discussed this all with Katie, they're trying to give us a scenario so that they can go out and market the site, that they have an approved plan, market the site, so tenants will say yes. It will not get any worse than what they're going to present without having to come back before us. But the people they deal with, they saw what happened the last time, that the developer backed out for whatever reason, right? And tenants are somewhat skeptical about saying yes and then finding 6 months later that they still don't have an approval, and we know how far ahead these big companies build. I mean, up there at the old Greendale Mall, Amazon built, and that thing sat, I go up there to pick up my grandchildren up at Wachusett on a daily basis almost. It sat there for months before any trucks even got in. Right? So it is a process for us, but it's a process for an owner to go and try to market something that they don't have approval on. Right. Gentleman up in the back, please.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Glenn MacDonald, 24 Stevens Road. And I have read the traffic study, by the way. But I realize the traffic study is on the next agenda. So I want to plant the seed of an idea that in some of our opinion, just my neighbors and I, we potentially have a public safety issue at the intersection of Westridge Road, the Intel property, and Technology Drive. That you can't tell from, what do you call them, the images from above, but anyone that's driven that road would know that intersection is at the crest of a hill. And the sight lines are very difficult, even as they exist today. And we have about 200 residents that will be making left turns onto Westridge Road. And I challenge the traffic engineers or anyone that's looking at this, that once you put a tractor-trailer stopped at that intersection to make a left turn into this site, and you have someone behind that tractor-trailer that wants to go home into Westridge Road, your sight lines are gone. You will not be able to see if anyone's coming over that hill in order to make a left. Even the traffic engineer said in his study, as you exit from the site, the sight line to the east, which is towards Trail Run, is already questionable, whether it's sufficient for a tractor-trailer for them to turn right in a safe distance. Now, think about that same scenario if you're going up the hill and you want to make a left into Westridge. That's my one comment. I don't expect an answer now. And I consider the public safety to not be National Development's responsibility, but the town of Hudson's responsibility. So if you have an informal traffic committee, I've heard something about there being fire, police, public works, have an informal traffic committee that maybe is going to be formalized soon. We would clearly want that group to take responsibility for that intersection if that is not widened or traffic lights or whatever the conditions might be. And I'll let you answer that. But I mean, the other point I want to make is the idea that the subsequent meetings on this site are all going to be by Zoom, I think is a big mistake. And we probably have no say in that. That's completely your decision. But trying to do public meetings like back in COVID days with 200 plus people trying to get some feedback, this clearly is a better venue to hear from your constituents. That's my opinion.
The only thing I would like to mention is that the members of the internal traffic committee, so that's myself, the fire chief, the police chief, and the building commissioner, are already reviewing these plans. That is the ITC, and we are already reviewing these plans, and all of their feedback, and the DPW director, my goodness, I forgot him as well, are reviewing these plans and providing feedback to the planning board as part of this public process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also,
and peer review as well. We have a traffic engineer that's working on behalf of the town, and he will be issuing a letter, I actually believe, in the next week or so, which will be available to the planning board and also to the public on the document library.
Yeah, just in case everyone didn't understand, when Katie keeps talking about VHB and Randy, That is their traffic consultant. The town we have our own traffic consultant when Christina talked about a peer review. And they take that information, added with their own information, and come up with their opinion or set of conditions or whatever. It really is checked and rechecked, all right? And you gave us, if Randy already hasn't had those scenarios in his presentation, I'm sure by January 21st, he will have, if not answers, will explain what they did and how they did it. Thank you. Young man.
Thank you. Indy Massa, 15 Michigan Drive. I'll try to be as brief as I can.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
No, I will be. Number one, I appreciate what the developers have done by physically moving the site of the building away from the residential community that it was near. I'm very impressed with that. I'm also impressed with how much response and concern there is about this site. I'm not impressed with some of the complaints of people who live in residence adjacent to or in an industrial zone. This is about the best industrial zone in eastern Massachusetts. It's been underutilized for 10 years. The town of Hudson has Proposition 2.5 popping up. We're going to spend another $25 or $30 million on a library. We want to have an art center in the Armory. I am somewhat sympathetic if the value of someone's house is going to go down because they live in an industrial zone that finally the town of Hudson is going to get some return on. My house value is going to go down. I don't think my taxes are going to go down. If someone thinks the tax revenue from this site is going to cause the town of Hudson taxes to go down, I believe that's an incorrect assumption. The Board of Selectmen will spend every penny they can. So, I think it's time that Hudson bit the bullet. There's going to be more traffic. There's going to be trucks. We're going to face several problems. And I trust the planning board, I trust the vendor, the developer, and I trust the Board of Selectmen to do things that are prudent and appropriate for the community of Hudson, not necessarily the community of X or Y, but the total community of Hudson. Thank you.
Young lady, I see you speaking up.
Pauline Sharapa, Autumn Drive. My question is about the impact visually for the Quail Run development, because I heard, people in this sight line probably aren't going to be able to see the building, these folks aren't going to be able to see the building. Can we go back to that slide? And how high is the berm going to be? How tall is the fence going to be? What's the fence going to be made of? I have no traffic questions.
No, I think, so we have a number of sections through sort of the southern property line. We've worked, I know you're the neighbors back there. We have spent a lot of time in our four walls at National Development thinking about this particular area.
Is that fence the current fence? Where's the current fence? Or is the current fence there?
So
this is chain link with the ribbed tarpaulin on it?
Yes. So that, let me see if I can explain the word here. So the best guess I have is that the existing fence is right on the property line, very close to it. In some cases, I think there's like a low rock wall, and then there's, overgrowth of trees and some vines, and it's sort of naturalized, right? It gets thinner in some spots and then a little bit deeper, particularly as you work your way to the east, right, as you work down the property line towards Marlborough Street.
Yes.
So right now, Intel has, like you mentioned, a chain link fence with some ripped trim on it. It's probably about 6 foot, maybe 8 foot tall. So that's right on the property line. If you look at our section here, so we're pulling the fence back, and it's approximately 125 feet or so from the property line. We're taking, and this actual image isn't doing it justice, we're showing some vegetation on the edge of the property line and then by the fence, but we're going to include additional plantings that will run in between in the space here. We're also creating a sort of grade change. We're grading up to build up that sort of visual screen you mentioned and try to avoid sort of visual sight lines from the residential properties through into the facility. We're working through those photo simulations, not only on Marlborough Street, but here on the southern property line, but it's going to help sort of create what this image is probably not filling in for us and looking in section, what that view will feel like and look like as you look through the property. But the goal is to screen the building and screen, not only offer visual screening, but also, help to mitigate the sound, sound migration.
Sound and light.
And light, thank you. Yes, and light as well. We do have a photometric plan included within the filing, but we can also look at that more closely with the community as we work through the plans.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. My comment to follow up on that is create it as if you'd like to live there, because I'd like to continue to live where I live. I love my neighborhood. I love the community. And Hudson, it's amazing. It's a great place to live. I'd like to continue to feel that way. And I think with the appropriate planning, that can happen.
Yes.
Thank you. Diane Millette, 21 Cayuga Drive. I just want to say, as a family with kids that we rely on the school bus to take them to school, I can't thank you enough for providing the free parking for school buses. And you've already proven that I think you're going to be great to work with. I look forward to supporting you. And thank you for being a good neighbor in that sense. Much appreciated.
All right, thank you very much. Katie, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything in closing.
Thank you for all the comments. It actually really is helpful to hear what you're thinking about so that we can really work to tailor our responses and give a really thorough report at our next discussion. So thank you for all the time.
Again, we have a peer review consultant that's going to, and when we get into the stormwater, we have someone that's been looking at the stormwater for probably 3 to 6 months already. The same thing with the traffic control. Then we have air and noise, okay, that we'll be talking about in future weeks. The next meeting will be 7 o'clock, January 21st. Okay? All right. So we have to make a motion to continue the public hearing to January 21st, 2026. Motion's been made by Joseph, second by David. Any further discussion? All in favor? A motion to adjourn tonight's meeting. Second by David. Any further discussion? All in favor?